Tonight we're going to be talking about something that everybody wants to have, and it's called purpose. Everybody wants purpose. Have you ever walked into a room or into a situation with some people and you're like, I don't belong here. This is not the place that I need to be right now. If you've been paying attention in the news, something kind of crazy happened. Has anybody heard anything about the Suez Canal, the Evergreen cargo liner deal? I've got a picture of this. So this is a cargo liner. This thing carries up to 20,000 of those cargo units. They're like 40 feet long, they're 8 feet wide, they're 8 feet tall. They're massive, massive things. This thing weighs over 220 tons, not 220,000 tons. Like, that's a lot of weight. I tried to do the math and I couldn't. It's really heavy. It carries over 20,000 of those things. It's a big boy. It's 1,300 feet long. It's as long as the towers in New York are tall. Like, it's just crazy how big this thing is. And March 23rd, it got caught in a sandstorm, in a windstorm, and it got pushed sideways in the canal. And the Suez Canal carries, they think it's up to 15% of the world's trade and commerce goes through that. It connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, which connects the Indian Ocean. So if goods are traveling from Asia, India, all the way to Europe, they use the Suez Canal to go through. So the first thing I saw about this was this picture right here, and it said, hey, you may have made a mistake today, but at least your mistake isn't visible from space, okay? Whatever you did today, you didn't do that. The number on this thing, so like there were 369 of the same type of boat waiting in the Red Sea to just go through. They think that it was costing the economy $400 million an hour. Like $10 billion a day. Because like what those ships are full of is like goods that could go bad, animals on some of them, like stuff that's just like, I don't know what the fallout is going to be for some of this. And a report came out yesterday. It got freed up yesterday and they moved it down and some ships started to kind of finally coming through there. But the report kind of came out that it was definitely a sandstorm, but there also might have been some human error involved. My goodness, like I don't want to be on that side. I'm glad I didn't choose to be some type of boat captain that's the size of a skyscraper because I don't know if I want to deal with the repercussions of that situation, okay? Like that's just don't want to be there. I remember probably one of the times that I have felt the most uncomfortable, like I don't belong, like what am I doing here? Is dubstep still a thing? You guys remember dubstep, like Skrillex, the dude with the under? So when I was a senior in high school, I ended up at an underground dubstep show on accident. And it was like downtown Springfield, but not like downtown Springfield. You ever go like north downtown Springfield and then you like make a left towards the silos? Like it was there and it was like a buddy's brother who had like invited us. And I was like, what's happening here? Like I just walked into this basement of this warehouse and this music is playing and the time that I knew this wasn't my thing was like after the show got started, this dude pulled out, I don't even know what it was like a stick and he lit both ends on fire and he just starts like whipping that thing next to the only exit, mind you, and I'm like, this is not safe, nor does it meet fire code, if any of you mind that. And I was homeschooled and I dressed like it and it was just like, I did not feel comfortable. I looked at my friend Adam and I was like, the music, I was like, we don't belong here. And it was a fun moment. I think one of the times that you realize you don't belong somewhere, you feel the most out of place, like you ever go to your old place of work and you go there and you're like, oh, they got that fixed, that's cool. And then you see behind the counter and you're like, oh man, they need to refill that. Like that's the thing. And then you see stuff start to go wrong and you're like, I know how to I can't do it. I want to help, I can't do it. And you just feel like you know what it takes to fix this situation, but you can't do it. Nobody wants to feel out of place. Nobody wants to feel uncomfortable. Nobody wants to look at their situation and say, I don't have any purpose here. And I was listening to a pastor this week who said, if we don't know our purpose, we'll always feel out of place. If we don't know what our purpose is in a place, you'll always feel like you don't belong. Think about that. You've had situations where you walked into and you're like, this is not my thing. My first day at Missouri State, I came in as a junior because I transferred. I came into this 500 level Constitution poli-sci class, and I was just like, he had a stack of books this tall, and I was just like Googling how to drop classes at Missouri State while I'm sitting there. Like, this is not for me. I need to take 100 level classes. And that's a funny joke. It's a funny thing to think about. It's a funny thing to think about, like, man, I don't want to deal with the Suez Canal, Evergreen boat fallout. Like, but what I would hate is for a group of people in their 20s and 30s where purpose is like, man, I'm just getting my degree done. I just got my first job. We're talking purpose. This is just like, I'll figure that out when I get married. I'll figure that out when I have kids. I'll figure that out when I have a little money in the bank. But it's always easy to kind of set our sights on that next thing and say, whenever I get that figured out, that's when purpose will really come. Whenever I find the person I'm going to marry, that's when purpose will really come. Whenever I find that real job that I've been training for so long, that's when purpose is going to come. And I think it's easy to see the gap, right? It's easy to look at the people around you and go, well, they have it figured out and I don't. They have their purpose and I don't. It's easy to see that fifth year, that little victory lap that you took in college as like, man, I missed the purpose. Everybody else got it done in 4 years and I don't have it done. Man, everybody else is dating, you're like getting married, and it's like, it's ring by spring. It's like people are getting excited about marriage stuff, and like, you're like, man, nobody's blowing up my phone for a date. Like, what do I have to do? You might look at like somebody else's family situation and you go, man, they have like the perfect, it looks like a sitcom, like they all sit on the same side of the table and they all dress nice, and like, and then I know my family and I'm like, that's not it. And you feel like I could just never do what they do. Well, I transferred to Missouri State, so I don't think I'll ever belong. I didn't grow up in this church thing, so all this is different and weird to me. So I'm just going to hang in the background. Or maybe you've never been in a church or never been in a church like this, and you're like, okay, I'm going to stand. This is not the place that I belong. The smells that I brought in here are not the smells that they need in here. The thing that I smoked, the thing that I drank before I came in here is not the thing that they... It's easy to see the gap between where you're at and where you think everyone else is at. Maybe there's a gap even in your own heart and in your own life and in your own mind. That maybe you have a relationship, maybe somebody in your family, or maybe somebody that everybody else is friends with, that person deeply, deeply hurt you. And nobody else knows. And you want to blow up their life. Or maybe you deal with something in the back of your mind at night, mentally, emotionally, that no one else knows about. Because as soon as you leave your room, as soon as you leave your car and get to the place, you put on a face. Guys, what's up? Everybody doing good? And then you come home and you just wonder why. Why do I feel this way? Why is this something that I have to carry, something that I have to deal with? You have pain in your past, pain in your history that nobody knows about. And you wonder, why do I have that pain? Nobody else around me is carrying that same thing. But if we don't know our purpose, we'll always feel out of place. Tonight, we're going to talk about a guy named Solomon. We're in Ecclesiastes, and if you have your Bible, you can open it up to Ecclesiastes, and if you don't, all the verses that I use tonight are going to be up on the screen, and you can follow along. And actually, if you don't have a Bible and you like one, right over here at these white signs, we would love to give you a Bible. But we're going to talk about Ecclesiastes and a guy named Solomon who wrote Ecclesiastes and a couple of other books in the Bible. But Solomon was an incredible person. He was the son of King David, who wrote most of Psalms, and was a big character in the Bible, a person that God used. And Solomon was his son, so he was a king. So Solomon was a king, he was an author, but on top of those things, the Bible calls him the wisest man who ever lived. He wrote the book of Proverbs, which is right before what we're going to be in tonight. But the thing that's probably the craziest that we'll probably like gasp at the most with Solomon, like, he's a king, that's cool, we don't have kings here. He was, wise, that's great. He wrote some books. Anybody can publish a book on Amazon these days, that's a big deal. But like, Solomon was the richest person to ever live. Like, Logan showed me a Forbes article. We were talking about this, and he was like, yeah, look up a Forbes article where it talks about, like, his wealth. Like, Jeff Bezos or whatever, however you say his name, Elon Musk, are worth, like, $130 to $170 billion, which is hard to fathom, right? King Solomon, the number, $2 trillion in today's money. Unbelievable wealth. Like, could have spent money his whole life at an unbelievable rate and would have never run out of money, right? And this is the guy. And Ecclesiastes is kind of him looking back at his life and saying, like, what was what? Like, how do I make sense of the way I use my time and the way that I pursued things? Because he struggled with purpose. I'm going to read you, we're going to read a lot of verses through Ecclesiastes, but I'm going to read these to prove a point. Ecclesiastes 1, verse 14, he says, I have seen everything that's under the sun, and behold, all is vanity. And that word that he uses, vanity, like vapor, it's there 1 second and it's gone the next. Breath. It's all vanity and a striving after the wind. Another version says it's like trying to catch the wind. Like you can't contain it. It's the attempt in and of itself is kind of a silly thing to think about. And in the next couple of chapters and verses, he talks through all the different things that he chased after with his time. In Ecclesiastes 1, 16 through 17, he says, I said in my heart, he's saying to himself, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, his kingdom. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and know madness and folly, both sides of the equation. I want to understand the wise man and I want to understand the fool. And he said, I perceive that this also is but striving after the wind. Wisdom and intellect. Being right. He did it. He was there. There was no one that he could find that couldn't teach him anything. He had all the wisest people around him constantly teaching him, and it still didn't satisfy his heart. In chapter 2, verse 4, he said, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and slaves who were born in my house. I also had great possessions and herds of flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and treasures of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and concubines to delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me. The dude had it going on. He said, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. If I saw it, I let myself have it. If I wanted it, I took it. If I saw something that would please me, I had it. I kept my heart from no pleasure. For my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Here's what he's saying there. He's saying everything came at face value. I'd eat the best food, I'd eat the best steak, and as soon as I was done eating it, that was its reward. I'd surround myself with the best singers, I'd surround myself with the best employees, and as soon as those moments were over, that's all I had. Everything was at face value. And it says, then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil that I'd expended in doing it. Behold, it was all vanity, and a striving after the wind. And listen to this. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. There was nothing he didn't taste. There was nothing he didn't see. There was nothing he didn't let himself experience. And he says, there's nothing to be gained. There's nothing that can satisfy what's within me. And it keeps going. In verse 14, the wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this is also vanity. He said, hey, the wise man dies at the end of his life. The fool dies at the end of his life. So he throws up his hands and he says, what good is it? For of the wise, as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance. Seeing that in the days to come, all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. Listen to this. So I hated life. Some of you are here and you limped into this building because this is your story. There's nothing that you haven't tried. Nothing that you haven't given yourself over to. Nothing that you haven't wanted and said, all right, I'm going to try that for a season and see how it works. And it doesn't do anything. He says, so I hated life because what was done under the sun was grievous to me. For all is vanity and a striving after the wind. All of his pursuits. All the things that he looked at and said, maybe this is it. Maybe if I find the right singers. Maybe if I find the right people to surround myself with. Maybe if I find the right employees. And then he said, it made me hate my life. In Ecclesiastes 2, verse 20, he says, so I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toils of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. He says, I've worked for the things that I have, and I'm going to die one day, and chances are one of my kids will take it and go, man, this is great. So he throws up his hands even further and he says, what good is this? He says, this is also vanity and great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow and his work is a vexation. It's an exhaustion. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This is also vanity. Do you have a rest? Do you have a peace about you? Ecclesiastes 3, verse 11, he wraps up these thoughts with this. He's talking about God, and he said he's made everything beautiful in its time, and also he has put eternity into man's heart. I think we know this. I think we've seen that there's something that nothing individually can satisfy. There's nothing wrong with enjoying some of God's created things, but they're not meant to be ultimate. I think I've shared it in here before, but one of my favorite stories that's terribly sad, but it shows this point, is Tom Brady in 2005, which Tom Brady broke my heart because I was a Rams fan in 2000 when they won the Super Bowl, and he ripped it away from the Rams. But if you look at the clock, they had 3 seconds left. They should have had a chance. Anyway, that's besides the point. But Tom Brady won the Super Bowl his first year, and then 2 more years, within the next 5 years, won a Super Bowl. He won 2 Super Bowl MVPs, incredible career. And in 2005, he did an interview with 60 Minutes. And I can't find on the internet what the question was, but this is Tom Brady's quote. In the league 5 years, 3-time Super Bowl champion, 2-time Super Bowl MVP. And this is what he said. There's times when I'm not the person I want to be, Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there? I've reached my goal in life. There's got to be more than this. People tell me I've done it. I'm 27. What else is there for me? He and the interviewer just looked at each other for a minute. And the interviewer said, "So what is it?" And he said, "I wish I knew." Ecclesiastes 3:14, Solomon wraps up his thoughts here and he says, "I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him." And I was reminded this week of Colossians. And in Colossians it says, "For in him, in Jesus, God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of the cross. And you who were once alienated, hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he has now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him." See, what we know, Romans 6:23 tells us that the wages, the payment, the consequence for our sin, for falling short of God's standard is death. And you read that and you're like, okay, we heard that about Solomon, like everybody's going to die, the wise man, the poor, I get that. But this isn't just death, this is eternal separation from God because of our sin, because we're falling short of God's standard. But the second half of that verse says, "But the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord." And the good news about a gift is that there's no strings attached. If I said, "I want to give you my Bible," and I said, "It's yours," all you have to do is come and receive it and get it, and it's yours. It's yours to keep. Everything else in this world, everything that we can touch and feel and get involved with is going to pass at some point in our lives. Like a vapor. Receiving more of it, getting to the bottom of it, it's like chasing after the wind. But the things of God will endure forever. This is God's plan for you. This is God's hope for you. That you would be reconciled to God because of Jesus' good work on the cross. That's what we're getting ready to celebrate in Easter. On Good Friday, Jesus laid down his life on a cross, even though that he did nothing wrong. So he could pay the penalty, pay the consequence for the sin that you and I committed so that we could have the free gift of life everlasting with God. That's what God did for you. That's the purpose that he has in your heart and in your life. I want to read you 4 stories. I'm going to tell you about 4 people that are in our community, that are in our team. I want to tell you about Chris. Chris grew up in what he describes as a great Christian home. He had parents who taught him about the Bible, and he made a faith commitment when he was a child that he said that he needed Jesus. And he said as he got older, he said that didn't mean quite as much to me anymore. And I kind of got blinded by some of the things that were around me. And I got to high school, And I saw all the people that I was surrounded with, and I wanted to be popular. I wanted to be known. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to mean something to the people around me. And when I called him on Sunday night to ask him about his story, he said, I wanted to be seen as popular. And that was so interesting to me. He didn't want to be popular. I wanted to be seen as popular. And he said, I was willing to do whatever it took. He said, I was more concerned with everything but Jesus. And he said that football, for the longest time, was the vehicle for those things. I was with the same people all the time. That was my group of friends. Those were the people that I knew. And he said, my senior year, when football ended, football's a fall sport. When football ended and he still had the rest of the semester, he said things just came apart. Because the things that he was relying on for his worth, the things that he was relying on for his meaning and belonging and purpose were gone. And he said that lasted through all of it, the rest of high school for him, graduation, the rest of his senior year. And he said everything kind of changed with a prayer. When he got accepted to school, when he showed up on campus, he said he showed up with a prayer. He said, God, will you just give me people that will help me know you better? And it started with a prayer. He said that 3 of the guys that he met on campus loved him and showed him what it looked like. Showed him that he was valued, not because they loved him, but because God loved him. And God valued him. And it all started with a prayer. He said this sparked his relationship with God. And he says, now I look out and I just want to do something great for God. I want to make my life meaningful. He said, this is his quote, he said, now he wants to do something great for God with his life. He went from pursuing people's acceptance to I want to do something great. And knowing Chris works behind the scenes serving our church every week. Why? Because he wants to make God known to the people around him. It's not about Chris. It's about the God who said, I love you, I created you, and you're worth it. I want to tell you about Taylor. Taylor said she had a good childhood, things were good, but she struggled with anxiety and depression through high school. She said the thought that dominated her mind was why. She said her parents taught her that God created her, but she said that just took it to, well, why did God create me? She said, I never could find an answer for it. Why? She said, I felt like I had no purpose. I had no idea why I was alive. She said, so I tried to fill the void with boys and alcohol and drugs, all to try to be happy. She says, going to college, I had just gone through a breakup, and it just sent those things even further. She says, it wasn't until I met a girl named Kennedy. And she said that Kennedy was so intentional and shared this story of Jesus with her. And she was listening, but she hadn't made a decision yet. And she said that she went to Kennedy's dorm room and she saw how put together her room was, and she went, I could never have what she has because my life is not this put together. I can't have what she has. But she said she went to a conference where the story of Jesus was shared, and she said, I was done trying to do it myself. And I gave my whole life to Christ. She said everything didn't get better overnight. She said I still have anxiety and depression that pops up, but she said now I have joy and peace that overrides them. She said, it gave purpose where there was none. And her next sentence she said, without skipping a beat, she said, I was created to glorify God, love the people he created, and make disciples, showing them God's goodness. She said, the new constant in my life wasn't a sense of purposelessness, it was peace and joy. I want to tell you about Chauncey. Chauncey grew up with 14 siblings. I don't know if I know 14 people's names. Chauncey had 14 siblings. He knew of God but didn't know much about God personally. He said parents were in and out of the picture but would leave for long periods of time. And he said, I was left in charge of the 8 siblings who were younger than me, and I had to do what I had to do to survive, to keep our heads above water, provide for my family, do what it took. He said the gravity of his situation didn't set in until he moved out at 14. He said he was angry and sad and he was confused. He was angry that he didn't have the upbringing that everybody else had. He was angry that he didn't have the guidance and the support that his friends had. He was confused as to why he had to do the things that he had to do to support his siblings, why his parents weren't always in the picture. He says a friend invited him to a church camp. He said he heard the gospel, and he said, I knew it was the thing that I needed to do, but I didn't know what was going to happen if I started making changes. So I said no that first night. He said that next night he came back, and he heard about Jesus. And he said he gave his life to him. And he said that didn't change the scenario at home. It didn't make everything better overnight. But he said that knowing the truth helped me see that I am loved by God regardless of who I can take care of and who I can't. He said where I was terrified of people leaving me, I know that God will never leave me. I want to tell you about Emma, who had a good upbringing. She said everything seemed to be good from the outside looking in. But she said during her freshman year of college, she was diagnosed with depression. She was going through a breakup and had a bad medical diagnosis all at the same time. And she said this went on for 6 months. And no one knew because she didn't feel like she could tell anyone. And she described that season as ashamed that those were the things that were going on with her. She said she was tired. She said her resting heart rate, laying in bed, was 130. She said, I was failing 4 classes. She says, one night I was headed back from a trip. And she said, me and a friend named Cass went to the top of Bear Park North. Isn't that where all important things happen? She said, we went to Bear Park North. And I asked her the question, is life ever going to get any better? She said she was tired of acting a certain way around everyone. And she started to think about how she could make an end to things without hurting herself too badly. And she said that the night that it got the worst, the night that she most strongly considered it, she's on the floor of her sorority bathroom, thinking about her worth, thinking about all these things that happened, thinking about how ashamed she was. She said, the only thing I could think of was John 16:33. This is Jesus talking, and he said, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Do you have peace? She said she gave her life to Christ, and she said she went from isolated and condemned to forgiven and saved. And I asked her how she would describe life after giving her life to Jesus, and she said, worth it, whole, and fully pieced together. there might be something that you're carrying that no one in this room knows about. And if it got out, you would be ashamed. You have been fighting for belonging your entire life. And you feel like you don't fit in. Maybe you're angry at the way that you were raised. Maybe you're angry at some of the things that happened. Maybe you're sad or confused about what happened in your past. Maybe you're just standing here wondering why. Jesus came to seek and to save that which was lost. To be somewhere and not feel or know your purpose is to feel lost. Jesus came to save you. You. I love what Taylor said, where she said, now I went from purposelessness to glorify God, to love the people that He created, and to make disciples. You know what that means? To show other people the goodness of God. I think about Chauncey, who just last Wednesday night, there was a student in youth that he got to share some of his experience because that student had a similar upbringing. That there was no better person for him to talk to because Chauncey had been there. Do you have peace? Do you have hope? Do you have purpose? Just like a gift, eternal life with God is being offered to you. Will you accept it? The worst thing that I can imagine is getting to the end of your life and not knowing that your life mattered. Can you say that? Will you bow your head? I ask you to bow your head because I want you to think and I want you to answer for yourself. Have you given your heart and your life to Christ? Have you gone from purposelessness to purpose? Have you met the God for yourself, not for your parents, not for your roommate, not for your brother or sister, not for your friend, not for your girlfriend or boyfriend? Have you met your Savior who will give you life and life abundantly? Romans 10 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, that means He sits on the throne of your heart. That means He gets to be in charge. That means it's Him in the driver's seat. And that's terrifying to think about with Chauncey making that choice of what changes are going to make. I also think about Emma, who said, it's worth it. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved. So I'm going to ask you again. Do you know this God? To believe it in your heart is to tell God, God, I believe that you came to rescue me. God, I'm tired of living the way that I have been living. I've tried everything else. And God, now I want you. And to confess with your mouth is to tell someone. I would challenge you. There's no more important thing that you could do than to give your life to Jesus. But one of the most important things after that is to be confessing that. Both to someone who just maybe invited you today, that you don't have to have all the words, but maybe you would just say, I made Jesus Lord. Maybe you need to just tap on the person's leg next to you and say, I did it after this. To confess it with your mouth. I don't believe there's any better hope. I don't believe there's any better purpose than the God who created you, reconciling you to himself. Even though we were alienated, even though we were hostile at one point, made us together with our Creator. So I'm going to challenge you one more time. Will you tell someone? Maybe you need to take that little connection card. Maybe you already half filled it out. There's a part at the bottom that just says, I'd like more information about giving about following Jesus. Or today, I gave my life to Jesus. Someone from our team will contact you in the next couple of days to help clarify with you, to help ask questions, to help in this new season for you. But I would ask you, have you made Jesus the Lord of your life? I'm going to pray, and then we're going to sing, and then we're going to have some people up front. And maybe you're the type of person, maybe you're a person of action, and I would challenge you, I would dare you to confess it to someone today. To tell the person that came with you, to fill out a connection card, to come up front and pray with someone, to talk with someone. Because there's something about marking a moment and saying, this is what God did in my life in this moment, that I'll never be the same. That your story can be like one of the people's stories who I shared tonight, of accepting that free gift in that moment. Will you do that today? I'm going to pray, and then we're going to sing, and I'll dare you to move. I dare you to make a decision. I dare you to just confess. God, we love you. God, I'm so thankful. God, while everything in this world feels like a striving, feels like something that we can't quite reach, that we can't quite attain, that doesn't quite satisfy us, God, you will satisfy. And God, I pray for the person in this room that is wrestling with this choice right now. God, I pray that you would give them courage. God, that they would make the decision of following you for maybe the very first time. That it would change their life forever. And that they would go from a place of purposelessness to hope. That it would be worth it, God. God, we love you. God, we thank you. In your holy name, amen. Would you stand and would you sing and would you make a decision? Would you mark this moment?